Let's bang, Tui. Let's bang. Hey, everybody. How are you? It is the 30th of May, 2024. My name is Luke Thomas. This is episode 206 of my live chat. Jesus, there we go. How are you doing? How are you doing? I am so happy to be here. Big day, fun day. I got a little cut here. My barber got a little carried away. Did he not? Kind of fucking hacked me there a little bit, but it's all right. The shape-up's all right. All right. And it was cheap, actually. It was only $50, which is for DC fucking cheap. Okay. How are you doing, everyone? So thank you for joining me. I greatly appreciate it. This is my live chat, as I mentioned, episode 206. Thumbs up if you're watching here on YouTube. Hit subscribe if you'd be so kind. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything. Thank you so much. In addition, what will we get to today? 302 is just days away, 2 days away to be specific. And I think the presser is right after this chat. So you can go from one right into the next one, I believe. Something like that. I don't know. I'll double check. In any case, doesn't matter. What's on the agenda today? Let's see. As I mentioned, the new UFC gloves, Nick Diaz's return. Feeling a little sketch about that, but a lot of different stuff. So it's my chat as much as it is yours, or vice versa. And so I put up a thread yesterday. You guys fill it up. We'll go for about an hour on that. If you want to get any questions in directly, you can do that into the paid portion of the super chat. You can leave a comment there with a little donation. You don't have to, but if you want to, I'd appreciate that. They go a long way. And of course, if you are a member, you can do that for free. Okay? All right. Very good. Happy that you're here. We have a lot to get to today. Big day, by the way, because right after this, I'm going to teach Tuki how to ride her bike. We've been working on things, and I think today is the day. We're going to see if she can ride her bike. So big doings, everybody. All right. With that in mind, let's get this party started, shall we? Yes, indeed. You can become a member, all that good stuff, and you get extra videos that I don't post anywhere else, plus the live chat, all that good stuff. Okay. Let's get going with the time that we have, right? Everything's good. Should be good, I believe. Yeah, should be good. All right. Let's do this, boys and girls. Let me turn this one off. 1 second. And then we'll get going. Okay. We'll do it this way. If I don't do it this way, we gonna do it this way. You know what? I'm just going to go back to this one. It's better. All right, here we go. Oops, wrong one. Let's go back. Here we are. Okay. Pull that up. There we go. All right, Luke, for a long time, the heavyweight division in boxing has always been the marquee attraction. Why is the same not true for heavyweight and MMA? Not only is heavyweight not as much of a draw compared to other weight classes, 145 to 205, but it is generally the least skilled division in all of men's MMA. Heavyweight boxing does not seem to have these issues. Heavyweight boxing definitely has those issues. Not necessarily to exactly the same extent, but it definitely has those issues. Heavyweight boxing is filled with all kinds of guys who used to be athlete here, not so much wrestled, but did something else. Do you guys remember around 2011 or so? You may not. He played, I think he was a linebacker for Michigan State, Seth Mitchell. Seth Mitchell tried to make a run at heavyweight. He didn't get far enough along. He got kind of far, but ultimately, I think he had already had a bit of a compromised chin from what he'd been doing in, the contact in American football, and then I think he got laid out a couple times in regular boxing, and then that was it. But you definitely see that kind of thing all the time. I mean, heavyweight boxing is filled with all kinds of numbers, no doubt about it. But like what you're talking about is it's still a little bit of a marquee attraction, and there is something to be said for the talent pool there. First of all, you're just dealing right now with a very good moment in heavyweight boxing. It hasn't always been this case. In my early 20s, the Klitschko era, obviously those guys were really good, but some of the fighters that they had to go against and some of the bouts there, they were not really all that great. You know what I mean? Like, the Chris Bird era, so to speak. So this idea that there's like this vast difference between them, it's a little bit overstated because you're just sort of dealing with a special moment in time. Also, you look at a guy like Usyk, and what's the thing that you notice that stands out with him that's not really the case you would see in modern MMA, which is the amateur system. There's a phenomenal amateur system for all the weight classes, but including heavyweight boxing. And also, if you're in one of those former Soviet satellite states, there might be some kind of state apparatus that assists and helps and connects you to that sport early, whereas you don't really have that with the heavyweights in a lot of other places. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is we currently have a really good era of heavyweight boxing. There is an amateur system that can connect people to the sport early. And I think that might be misleading people to believe that like heavyweight boxing doesn't have some of these issues. It definitely does. It's just not necessarily as pronounced as it is now. Also, what I would say is it's hard to know how determinative this is, but I would guess that the fact that you can make enormous sums of money potentially at the very, 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 very high end of heavyweight boxing to be a little bit more attractive than the alternative. Also, it's not as hard on the body for training. I mean, obviously, you can get, concussed and everything else, but day-to-day training is not nearly as tough. So like MMA doesn't pay as well. It's much tougher. The barrier to entry is lower, and you get a lot of those people matriculating over. But yeah, there is a difference. It's just not quite as big as you might imagine, but there is one. Okay. Luke, in your opinion, what makes a successful fight camp? It's a better question for a coach, but can you discuss the key elements that contribute to a fighter's preparation and how different camps have produced top-tier fighters? It's not super complicated in the sense of like what, in talking to fighters about how they build their camps, some of the things that I have observed and the common denominators, they're all pretty much the same. It is a combination of the appropriate coaching staff, typically enough heads up in terms of timing, but then more importantly, it's the coaching, it's the time, it's the understanding of the opponents. So if there's an opponent switch that can obviously derail a camp. But when you really think about it, we made this point last week, like you don't necessarily need the best arrangements. You just need the right build out. So the way I've seen it done is, okay, you get 10 weeks notice, let's say, right? And what are you going to build out? You have to figure out who your opponent is. Once that's sort of settled, you now have a 10-week camp to build. There's going to be, they're going to break up the camp into training blocks, depending on how they want to arrange that. So for the first 2 weeks, it'll be this. For the next 4, it's that. Then the next 2, and then the next 2. And each one of those phases has a different goal, whether that's weight maintenance, whether that's getting cardiovascular capacity where it needs to be, whether it's, specific drilling around whatever. It's getting the proper training partners or sparring partners and building all that out. And the guys who have like a guy like Dustin Poirier, he's got coaches who all work together. He's got training facility and sparring partners all together with American Top Team. And they know exactly what they have to build out. They know exactly what his weight is supposed to be at every interval. They know exactly what kind of, what training block. And if he's got 12 weeks, let's say, what each training block is designed to do, where he should be at each one of them. Obviously, he's got a long-standing relationship with Mike Brown, one of the longest coaches in the game. So it's really just kind of a function of weight maintenance, of breaking the camp into the various blocks that they need. Not everyone does that system, by the way, but a lot of them do. It's having access to the appropriate sparring partners, being able to pay them to get them to come do that, and then just sort of building out over time the exact place that you want to be in terms of weight, in terms of the exact preparation, the getting in all of the different things that you need in terms of the individualized day. Your days are typically built out, and then the weeks are built out, and then the months are built out for that individual training block or camp block. And then you can go from there. People might have, by the way, like there can be great, variation in how all of that goes. You can throw in a nutritionist, you can throw in a dietitian. But when you look at guys like, again, I bring them up all the time, the fight dietitian, the guy who works with Izzy, the guy who works with Volk, because weight management is such a continuous part of what they want to do, and that's such a driving determinative factor of how they train. I'm not saying that defines everything, but it's a key role through the phasic moments in camp, and then they build the training, the coaches and this dietitian, so to speak, they build all of that into these different training blocks all the way through. That is often how I've heard it done, but you might hear total variety along the way, and then they ramp up sparring, and then they build out. It's all about getting to build towards a peak and then a slight taper off at the end, like what in lifting weights or powerlifting they might call deload, a little bit of that at the end. and then you go on. But it just gets easier when you know your body, when you know your weight, when you know your sparring partners, when you have enough time, when your coaches have all worked together before. Yeah. So really it's weight maintenance, training, partners, building out for each of those blocks, tapering up or building up, tapering off, and then fighting. Sounds easy. It's not. It's one of those things where it's simple, not easy, right? Where it's not easy to go through with that, but it's not. People think that like, oh, it's this hack to get this, and it's that hack to get that, and it's this little trick to do this. It's really just about making sure that they are having the right volume of work, that there is the appropriate amount of recovery, that there's weight maintenance along the way, that work is specifically designed for that opponent, and then or to lose weight if there's road work that's built in. That sort of a thing. I have low vision, so I cannot drive. I don't know what low vision means. Public transportation where I live is trash. You must live in America, my friend. So getting to the gym on my own is difficult. I recently became a homeowner, congratulations, and have enough of a lawn to join the Psycho Yard Gym Squad. Yes! All I have currently are kettlebells. What equipment should I get? Any recommendations on exercise tutorials with space constraints? People think I'm joking when I say this. I'm not joking when I say this. You don't need anything more than kettlebells. Having other things is nice. Don't get me wrong. Having a bench is valuable, and you can do a lot with it. I have the Newell bells, the adjustable dumbbells. You can rotate from 5 to 80 pounds in each arm. Those are great. I have a cambered bar that I can curl with. I have a Olympic weightlifting bar. It's got a little bit of bend in it, obviously. I've got a rack to put it in. I've obviously got weights that I can use. I've got bands. I got a lot of stuff. Like, you can buy all this stuff, and it's valuable. If I had to be as minimalist as possible, you don't need anything else besides kettlebells. If you wanted to add a little bit more than that, especially if you have a lawn, getting a sled. Dragging a sled is fucking awesome. And you can get cheap sleds. You can get a Prowler sled that, it's going to sound kind of loud, but if you have a yard, you can drag it in the yard. That thing will tear you up in a good way. I think kettlebells and a sled, you can do some bands if you want, a bench if you really feel like you need it, a timer. Dude, you can get jacked as shit doing that. No doubt about it. All that other stuff is nice, but you don't need them. You definitely don't need it. Let me turn this off for a second because this fucking thing is driving me nuts. There we go. Let's see. Okay. Pull it up a little higher. There we go. Luke, in your opinion, why does weight not matter nearly as much in larger weight classes? I wouldn't quite say that. Usyk versus Fury, Wilder versus Helenius, Stipe through his run at heavyweight. You see differences of 30 plus pounds relatively frequent. For example, how do you think someone like Islam would do at 85? I think Islam would have a hard time at 185. I mean, I think he could win some fights up there because he's very skilled, and if he was walking around at his natural weight, he could do well. You should not be fooled by the fact that there's weight disparities in heavyweight classes. It certainly matters, especially in a case like Usyk and Fury, where it's not just weight, but it's also reach, it's also height. All of those things can definitely be determinative factors in fight outcomes. At the same time, why isn't it as much of a deal? Well, partly we just ask heavyweights to deal with it. In other words, once you get past 205 pounds in MMA, obviously you guys know, then you can just go from basically 207 to 266 pounds. There's a huge variance. Part of that reason is because we don't want cruiserweight, or what they have now in boxing, bridger weight. Part of it is just a desire to eliminate what would be notoriously weak weight classes. So it's not even a sense of, weight doesn't seem to matter as much, more than it is on some structural level. You just can't have a functioning sport when you have that many weight classes in between 205 and 265 pounds. Just flat out, you can't do it. It'll be very, very bad for the sport. So that is one major reason. And by the way, you see that in high school wrestling as well. I don't know what the weights are anymore, but 197 and then 285, like there's a big jump basically after 200 pounds. And you see this in collegiate wrestling to an extent as well, where it's just a huge jump because they just don't have the bodies. It doesn't make sense to fill that other slot. All those other guys are doing potentially other things in other sports. So that's a really, really big one. The second thing I would say is it's not to say that 30 pounds extra doesn't matter, but it is to say if you're 200 and let's say 35 pounds and you're strong as shit and you're going against someone who's 265 pounds, they're bigger, but they're not, they got a little bit more, as they would say, loose change on you. The fact that you have less weight actually is in no way, I wouldn't say that. It ends up not being a factor you really have to worry about because you might have more speed, you might have just as much power, you might have more explosive strength, whatever. Like there's ways in which the athletic profile can change in that place where weight, yeah, you'd be at a deficit there, but the other factors ultimately put you out ahead. And so that's why you end up getting these results where you get guys, and you guys have seen it too. Yeah, you get your Brock Lesnar's who have to like cut weight to make 265, but you guys have seen big, strong heavyweights, some of the better ones, Couture notwithstanding, is a smaller end of that. But again, a guy like Stipe, a guy who's about 240-ish, around there, like 6'4", 240, to me is exception here or there. That to me is the best athletic profile body type for heavyweight, because those guys can be just as strong as their competitors. They're typically going to have a little bit more athletic background if they meet that natural kind of guideline, and they're much more mobile, and that just gives them enormous advantages, right? So there are a series of variables and competing advantages. Weight can be one of them at heavyweight, but because of the nature of the weight class and because of the nature of different body types and how they get to those weights and because of the variance, that can change the interplay between them. And so when you get down to like 155, and then you can't, you can be what, 147 to 156 or whatever it is, you can be in that place and you can fight in that weight class. There's just not, you might have some advantage, and that can really confer some, but everything else is a little bit more tightly constrained. You can have difference in body types too. The openness of the space above 200 pounds, relatively speaking, creates, I won't say an open playing field, but it creates a lot more variance in how athletic profiles match up against one another, or size match up against one another. I mean, Usyk's a great example. Is he as big and tall as Fury? No. But how did his power punching match up with Fury? Pretty fucking well. How did his speed match up? He was quicker. In general, he was quicker. You know what I mean? And he didn't get tired as easily. All that moving around, all that long guarding that he was doing, that's exhausting for a bigger guy like that. So there's a trade-off there that he is making by virtue of that. It just creates more variance, and that variance makes the interplay a little bit different. All right. Got some questions about Blaydes. Hey, Luke, if Blaydes happens to beat Tom, which, by the way, let me say one thing, if I may. There's one thing that is getting lost in all of this that I do really want to mention about Jon Jones. There is, and I brought this up before, but I want to be very, very clear. There is one thing he has said that is 100% true. Completely true. I have seen it on any number of times with him. I've been watching this dude since he beat Goose Mao, who coming from the IFL. Like, this is true. He notes that there have been any number of dudes who have been that's the guy that's going to beat Jon Jones. Like that guy. Oh, it's going to be Gustafsson. Oh, it's going to be Cormier. Oh, it's going to be Bader. Oh, it's going to be Shogun. Oh, it's going to be Machida. Oh, go down the list. And either they fell apart against him or they came unglued against a different contender and the fight never. For example, here's a great one. Like, Brandon Vera was like, well, he was expected to lose that one, but he was supposed to be the next big thing. And then John broke his face with an elbow. He kind of came unglued. Or there's the case of Phil Davis. Remember when Jon Jones fought Glover Teixeira in Baltimore? I was there. This is the scrum that Dana White did where he called Chris Cyborg Vanderlei Silva in a dress, right? That was that day in Baltimore. We were actually in the Camden Yards building where the Baltimore Orioles play, right? We were right inside that space. It was actually a cool space. And if you remember at that media day when they were doing face-offs, Jon Jones was fighting Glover Teixeira. Phil Davis was fighting Anthony Rumble Johnson. Phil Davis was supposed to face off against Rumble and instead walked over and faced off against John. And if he had won that fight against Rumble, he probably would have gotten that fight. What happened? He fucking lost, right? And remember, this is Phil Davis. He's kind of fallen off in terms of the radar. I don't even know if he does media interviews anymore. But he was the D1 national champion, I think at 197 at Penn State. And he came unglued. So when John says stuff like, hey, I have seen every kind of dude who was labeled as that's the boogeyman, that's the guy that's going to beat John, and then they couldn't even come close when they had their chance, or they fucked it up before they even got their chance, he is telling the truth. That is 1,000,000,000% certain. And I bring this all up to say, dude, Curtis Blaydes is not a chump. Not a chump. That's a good fighter. That's a big dude. He is strong. If at that weight class, you can make one mistake. That dude drills you. I'm not saying he's like known as a knockout artist, but you don't have to be when you're that big. Or, he ends up on bottom and Curtis Blaydes starts fucking coming over with the elbows. Dude, it's going to be Armageddon if he does that. And so I bring this up to say, Curtis could beat him. I don't know if Tom is the guy. He seems like he's the guy. I kind of think that he is, but that doesn't mean shit. What you and I think doesn't. What we think doesn't mean anything. What means that something is what it ultimately ends up happening. The point about what John is doing is that he has a belt, and when you have a belt, you have a responsibility to the weight class, whether it's Tom or whether it's Curtis. Obviously, if Curtis ends up winning, John's going to do, mark this video. He's going to do the biggest victory lap. He's going to say, see, I told you he's not the guy. I'm going to keep on fighting Stipe, blah, blah, blah. What it is. But that's not the point. The point is not that you get vindicated by one result of the interim title defense. The point is, why is the interim title being defended at all while you're just sitting there? That's the point. Okay. Getting back to the question. If Blaydes happens to beat Tom, and let's say it's in some boring but thorough way, well, it gets controlled or whatever, right? Would there be a demand, you think, for John to unify his belt versus Blaydes? No fucking chance. Or is part, not all, of the demand for John to unify his belt linked to fans wanting to see him versus Tom specifically? Yes, who is a very exciting fighter with quick, explosive finishes, who seems to be the best of the next wave and has a country behind him. Not that I'm advocating for it, but part of me feels like John versus Pineda would go over a lot better with fans than John versus Blaydes. Yeah, I mean, dude, this is the crazy part. Like, if Blaydes wins, he becomes the interim champ. He would be entitled to a unification bout or, whatever the next thing in line, right? That's what he would get. But in terms of the commercial demand, I cannot guarantee, but I agree. In terms of commercial demand, it probably is still Tom because he still also has the interim belt. Second to that's probably Poatan. And then third would be Blaydes at that point, if he had the title or whatever, the interim title. Yeah, I don't think there would be much of a demand, especially to your point, if it's boring. Now, if he goes up there and just fucking throttles him, kind of changes it a little bit, maybe. But I don't think, do you really believe that John Jones has designs on fighting Curtis Blaydes? I don't think he's got designs on fighting Tom Aspinall, much less Curtis Blaydes. I think he's going to do the Stipe thing. If he can find a way to get Poatan, he probably does that. And then maybe he calls it a day. Maybe he calls it a day after Stipe anyway. No. But for sure, Blaydes would not, especially with a ho-hum way of doing it, thorough but boring, no mandate to fight John Jones. John would never take that fight. Never, 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 never. And again, if that happened, I guarantee you John would be like, see, it's another one of these guys that everyone told me was the guy and that it didn't happen. So I'm hoping we can avoid it because that's not the point. The point is it's not Tom or bust. It's the guy who's got the interim belt who we think could be the next big thing in Tom, but we shall see. Ooh, good question. Someone asks, main event you're more excited for, Corey versus Umar or Whitaker versus Hamzat? I go back and forth on this every day. Dude, here's the thing. Hamzat is electric, right? That's part of his appeal. He's dominant, and then in the first round or two, he's fucking electric. So for that reason, I'm a little bit more like nervous about it, But Corey versus Umar to me feels like one of those fights that you kind of have to sit back, calmly watch, see how it progresses, nip and tuck. Going to be really difficult for either guy. You know what I mean? I just don't see either guy dominating the other guy in that way. It could happen, of course, but it seems unlikely. It seems that one's going to be much more technical and cerebral and patient almost. Whereas I think Whitaker and Khamzat, at least early, is just going to be, you know, two cats in a bag. It's just going to be bananas. And so Corey versus Umar, it just appeals to a different sensibility about what you like about fights. Might be a little bit higher level between the two of them. That remains to be seen. Obviously, Whitaker's a former champion. Neither Corey or Umar is. But they're different kinds of fights in that way. Let's see. Here is hoping Nick got an armored truckload of money. Sad to see legends fight way past their prime. I doubt it. I mean, when has anybody in the UFC ever gotten a truckload of money? You know, Connor, I guess, Ronda, maybe John Jones on occasion or something, but no, they don't. That phenomenon doesn't exist. I know what you mean. You're sort of speaking metaphorically. Dude, 41. He'll be 41 when he fights. There's two 40-year-old pluses on that August 3rd card. Last win was BJ Penn, 2011. I remember that one. The press conference, if you guys recall this one, it was unusual. I don't think they've done it since. The press conference for that event is where the UFC announced John Anik was going to be the new full-time commentator for them. That's how long ago it was. Because it was outdoors at New York, New York. And if you guys have ever been to New York, and Vegas, you know it's right on the strip there, and they've got like a fake Brooklyn Bridge there kind of area, and it was inside that place, and that was where they announced John Anik was taking over. That is fucking how long ago that was. 2011. I wasn't even married in 2011. I didn't get married until I was 32, which would be a year later. So. Long time. That was also one of the first times I'd ever seen BJ Penn after that fight. I'd ever seen him scuffed up like that. I'd never seen him physically marked in a way where someone had put a beating on him before. And I'd seen him, you know, the Machida fight obviously was not a beating, but it was thorough. And he didn't look like that. That was the first time I'd ever seen BJ Penn look human, like truly look human, you know. But that, I mean, if you had told me that would be it would be potentially that first of all, that could end up being the last win he ever has in MMA, which is scary. But if you had told me that would either be the last one or the next one he'll have will be, you know, was it 13 years later? I don't know if I would have believed it. I'd be like, it's going to be 13 years and he's still fighting, and that there's going to be it's hard to comprehend. The guy who go plotted Takanori Gomi. It's difficult to understand. And yet here we are. Here the fuck we are. I saw someone say this. I forgot who it was on Twitter, so please forgive me. But someone was saying, dude, this is like a sobering thought. I saw somebody on Twitter being like, you know who's watching that card with Tony versus Michael Chiesa, Tony Ferguson, and now Nick and Vicente Luque? You know who's probably, this is what they said, you know who's watching that card very closely? And I was thinking to myself, where is this going? Jake Paul. And then I was like, oh, like, you know, my soul got taken out of my chest all in one go. And I'm like, dude, I can't even say that's wrong or crazy or in any way unfair. If you're Jake Paul and you end up beating a 58-year-old Mike Tyson in July, which seems probable, what does a Nick Diaz fight do for you? Especially if he loses, like in this case, but it's like a little blood and guts before he ultimately gets overwhelmed. Dude, Nick Diaz army, they're loyal. It's not what it once was, but they're still pretty fucking loyal. Like, oh my God. And dude, the mere idea of Jake Paul fighting Tony Ferguson almost makes me angry. And I'm not one of these guys who's like super bitter about Jake Paul all the time. Like, I've seen his hustle up close. I don't respect, you know, what it would mean to beat Mike Tyson. That's not what I'm saying. But like, you know, I've seen the business that this guy has built for himself up to this point. I didn't mind the Anderson Silva fight. I don't think you guys, for the most part, did either. I didn't love it, but, you know, I didn't mind it. And certainly I didn't mind the Tyron Woodley fights in the same way that everyone else did, because he was picking a fight with MMA. I thought that was kind of interesting. But dude, the very idea of him fighting Tony, less so Nick, but even that one, stomach turning, is just horrifying to me. And you have to imagine he probably has to at least consider his options, win or lose, if between those two, if they get ultimately released from the UFC. Like, it is. And folks might be asking, why has the UFC released these people? Partly, I don't quite know. Maybe they just need the money or whatever. One also has to wonder if they're keeping him to prevent Jake Paul from getting fights like this. I mean, that is entirely a hypothesis. I'm not basing on anything. But you do have to wonder if they're like trying to choke off whatever money is left for Jake at that end. But dude, if Jake's willing to fight a 57-year-old guy, I mean, there's almost no bottom, you know. All right, if Khabib didn't retire, do you think he would have remained undefeated as of 2024? Probably not. People who got title shots were Chandler, Charles, Dustin, Justin, Volk, and other contenders, Armand, Gamrot, Fiziev. Don't imagine Khabib losing to any outside of a low percentage punch or bad weight cut. Okay, let's go through one more time. Michael Chandler, Charles Oliveira, Dustin, Justin, Volk. Yeah, he probably would have beaten those. Armand, Gamrot, Fiziev. Okay, so I'll just say this. It's one of the most insightful things that something I really remember from Matt Brown. I brought it up before. I'll bring it up again. He beats those guys head to head. I feel very confident with that. Armand could get interesting. Gamrot could get interesting. But in general, I think he beats all those guys head to head. But as I've said many times, and it was something that Matt Brown told me once, when I interviewed him ahead of UFC, what was it, 144? This was the John Jones, Rashad Evans card. Matt Brown fought Wonder Boy on that card. And I remember asking him at the time, you know, what do you make of his like undefeated kickboxing record? Because there's obviously a lot of people who think that the kickboxing record is great, but if you look at who he was fighting, he wasn't fighting super elite guys. Like, that's a bit of a myth. Wonder Boy's great, don't get me wrong, but it's not true that he was fighting the same caliber of guys that like Poatan was. Not even close. And what he said was, it doesn't really matter that he was fighting those guys. What matters is that there had to have been a time he showed up and he was hurt. There had to have been a time he showed up and he was sick. There had to have been a time he showed up and he didn't feel great. There had to have been a time he showed up and like the opponent was just much better than he thought. And he still found a way to win. And that is what he ultimately took from that record. Not that he beat the best guys, but that he had stayed active, stayed competitive. And through all of that, he just knew he had to overcome a lot more than just the skill of that opponent on that night. So what I would say is head to head, I feel like Khabib beats those guys. But dude, you stay in MMA long enough, I can tell you, nobody, or very few people anyway, Ray Longo notwithstanding, nobody was predicting GSP was going to lose to Matt Serra. Like, didn't see it coming. Nobody could have seen that shit coming. And that is exactly what you got. MMA upsets. And I often say this too, man. People always think, oh, the big change in power will be when this celebrated figure fights the next best guy who's storming through the division. Sometimes that happens. Oftentimes what you end up seeing is, especially for long reigning title holders, it's not the guy you saw coming. It's somebody who was maybe a flawed contender who didn't necessarily scream, that's the guy to win. They just have a great night. Look at Dominic Reyes and John Jones. Like, the notion before that fight that Dominic Reyes was going to do what he did to John Jones, and I know John ultimately won it. I believe that is probably the only fight I've ever seen where I was certain John had lost. I did not believe he lost the Gustafsson fight. You know, there is certainly a debate to be had over that. But dude, Dominic Reyes, I can assure you, did not have Daniel Cormier's reputation. And Dominic Reyes, I can assure you, did not have Gustafsson's reputation as like, oh, this could be the guy, or even Rashad Evans for that matter. And Rashad got I mean, I think he got, maybe he won a round. I forget what the scores were for that one. And look what he did. He won 2 of those rounds. He probably should have won 3. Consistent excellence is so difficult over time. The hardest thing to do in MMA is to defend a UFC weight class title over time. Jumping weight to get another belt is probably the second hardest thing, but I don't think it's as hard as just standing a post, accepting contenders, and then watching what happens. That is so fucking difficult, and any minor error. And by the way, you're talking about 155 for Khabib. Having watched him get cottonmouth and then miss on his fight with Tony, this was on the Tyron Woodley and Wonder Boy card, or Khabib was supposed to be the top of it. It was a Khabib Tony card. Was it 207, 209? One of those. I remember I put a microphone in Khabib's face. Dude, that fucker had cotton mouth like I had never seen. And I'd seen some dudes in high school where they're wearing the suits and then they're spitting into the Snapple bottle all day because they don't want to swallow because they're cutting weight. And I'd seen them with cotton mouth. His cotton mouth, he could barely, it looked like he was trying to gargle sand. You know what I mean? All it would have taken is for one of those weight cuts to go a little bit off, and dude, someone would have sent his fucking chin into orbit. So head to head, yeah, I'd pick those guys. But over time, trying to control for the chaos of all that MMA brings is tough. Don't sleep on that. Of all the possible outcomes for UFC 302's main event, how likely do you think it is that Islam wins by TKO or KO? Unlikely, unless it's like a ground and pound finish. Do you see it as more of a likely outcome than Poirier by TKO? No. Fuck no. Another one that's got these all have like 1 or 2 likes. How in the world did none of the UFC media ask Islam if he has a staph infection? This would severely impact the fight. I don't know if they were aware of some of the photos that are circulating by the time that the media thing happened. I mean, I'm sure that they would have. It's kind of UFC media tends to dance and dodge around certain things. I don't think that they would have danced around that. I just feel like it wasn't part of the online consciousness at the time of media day. But I guess if there's a presser that he can be, someone's going to bring it up today. I guarantee you that. Yo, I got my Stanley Cup that my wife bought me. All right. Okay, here we go. Mickey Gall is fighting on this card, which reminds me, what are MMA topics you've talked about ad nauseum that in retrospect you wish you could have skipped entirely, like CM Punk or BC's Gaethje one-leg strike? Away conspiracy. Fucking hell, dude. There's so many. The CM Punk thing was one of those ones where I was just like, dude, what the fuck are we doing? Do you guys remember? And it sounds so personal. I really don't mean it to be. He's gone on to do great things. I know he does still some commentary for Cage Fury Fighting Championships. I got nothing bad to say about it. I don't have any issues with him personally. But a guy so like rank, manifestly unqualified for the UFC getting this opportunity. It's like, oh, like Brock Lesnar didn't deserve a shot either. But you could kind of like, you could kind of look at it and be like, all right, I kind of get it. This is fucking gorilla who D1 national champion. He beat the shit out of who was it, Minsu Kim, whoever the guy he was, he beat at the K1 show, all that stuff. You're like, all right, I can take a flyer on this. And then he ended up being like, really great. Like Punk had none of those things. Phil had none of those things. He had fucking zero. The only thing he had was the ability to draw at the box office. And what just gave me, I just was so nauseating to listen to, was how many people were lecturing skeptics of why or detractors of why he was there as like, one, you got to respect everybody who gets into the cage. Bitch, go to regional MMA and then tell me that. Just shut the fuck up with that, please. Yeah, I don't want to be like outwardly completely dismissive of people who've stepped in when I have not. That is true. Having some degree of respect for that, I think, is valuable. But shut the fuck up. Please shut the fuck up with this. I have seen people walk into the cage who had less than no business being there, who I could have beaten the dog shit out of in my weight class, drunk as balls. We're talking about people in commissions or for promoters, especially like a lot of states don't have an amateur system. So what the promoters do is they'll have like 2 pro fights on the card and then the rest are amateur fights, right? And that way the promoter doesn't have to pay for all those fights. You should see some of the motherfuckers, the garbage pail kids that I have. Dude, have raise your fucking hand if you have seen MMA fights with 30 other people in a converted pool hall where the curtains on that bitch still had nicotine stains. Like, you got to go see MMA at that level where you're like, everyone who walks into the cage does like this is the fucking Marines, pallbearer. Like this is the fucking silent drill team or something. Please shut the fuck up. And it's the same thing about the troops. You got to respect all the troops. Do you know some of the fucking dirt bags I have served with? Like, they don't deserve your respect. Trust me when I tell you they don't deserve your respect. Racist wife beaters don't deserve your respect. Trust that. So, like, they were using this for CM Punk to be like, well, everyone who steps in the cage is, yeah, listen, it's not easy to step into the UFC octagon with 25,000 people against an opponent who we then later learned was like way better than him. Yeah, that's not easy. Fair enough, that's not easy. But that doesn't mean you deserve to be here or that this is in any way anything other than, except for Mickey Gall, a waste of everyone's time. I couldn't stand that. That drove me fucking bananas. And the other one I couldn't stand about that same thing was when they were trying to show his improvements, like in the gym. And I know it sounds personal. I promise you it's not. Like, as a person, I don't know him. I don't know how to make a personal argument about it. I'm just talking about what we could see on tape and the value there. And it showed him like he was like taking someone's back and in practice, and like they played this music like fucking Chariots of Fire. Dun, 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 dun. Like this was some incredible warp speed athletic accomplishment. Like, whoa, he's taking his opponents back in sparring now. Like, look out. I'm like, that is no more revelatory or interesting or meaningful than fucking fist bumping. I've taken, you know what I mean? Like, I've taken a lot of training partners, back mount. I'm nothing. Like, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean shit. And then people will be like, yo, look, he's out there taking backs. He's about to fuck shit up. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? What the fuck are you talking about? So that was one of those moments when people were like, well, you got to respect everyone who gets into the cage. I'm like, yeah, you don't watch MMA. You watch UFC, that's fine. You don't have to watch MMA, but you don't watch MMA. You don't watch MMA. You watch enough real MMA. UFC is real MMA in a sense, but it's not like, if you look at of all the fights that take place in a calendar year over the entirety of Earth, UFC is not representative of what the rest of that shit looks like. Go look at the rest of that shit. You're going to see you're going to see people that look like you can't believe this is a regulated activity. It would be like, who the fuck licensed the promoter? Who the fuck licensed this guy? And then they're going to put him, and then everyone's like, oh, you guys see that big, there was a big to-do because someone had posted video, Devin Haney, the boxer, he got his start as like a 17-year-old in Mexico, right? Fighting just donks down there. And people being like, yo, he was fighting donks down in Mexico. I'm like, what is it you think happens on pro debuts? This is what that looks like. It looks like that. They take some guy who's got some ability, it might be some brown belt somewhere, athletic kid, and they give him just an absolute fucking mutant, an overweight mutant, just living on processed foods and Rain energy drink. And he gets his ass whooped big time. I have seen that shit 8 million times. And they were like, this is disgraceful. I'm like, that's MMA and boxing. That's just how that shit goes. So this is what I mean. You cannot, it's so important if you're a UFC fan to go to regional MMA. And by the way, CFFC doesn't even qualify because they're a feeder organization. They kind of like, their whole job is to weed people out. I'm talking go a level below that. Go to like the regional donks. And you test that theory. Everyone who steps into the cage deserves your respect. What's that mean? You sure about that? You sure about that? I don't think so. Thoughts on Cejudo versus Yan or Song? He's been calling out both. Can he win those at this point in his career? Well, he's got terrible jokes, which we all know. I've seen some of those. I'd be happy with either of those. I would say Song is a little bit more beatable for Henry, but Henry's what, 37 now? How old is Henry? Henry is Triple C currently stands at, he's 37. His birthday's not till February, but he's 37. I mean, it's going to sound like I'm being dismissive of a guy who is a 2-weight class champion in UFC and an Olympic gold medalist. I don't mean it to be, but 2008 was a long time ago. 37 at 135 pounds. I think either of those guys probably give him a real tough fight. And Jan I would outright pick to beat him. Based on his last few performances, would you say Dustin is very much still in his prime? No. Or is he already on the come down? Definitely on the come down. Also, would you rate his chances at winning against Islam higher than against Khabib? That's a good question. So here's why he's on the come down. Remember, I don't mean to say he's like washed. That's different. But you're saying, is he in his prime? No, he's post-prime. 35 years of age at 155 pounds is a very tough place to be. And I don't think he's like far down the hill. I think he's like just over the top of it towards the other end before things get bad. He's still competitive. He can still win this fight. So he's by no means washed. Middle of the prime? No. But definitely not washed. He's in that in-between stage where still dangerous, but maybe not quite exactly the guy he once was. So I think that's the case. Do his chances against winning Islam higher than against Khabib? No, probably about the same. Probably about the same, to be honest with you. The thing that, if you look at Khabib is, I would not classify as a reckless fighter, but if you look at my breakdown, actually just go watch the fight yourself. It's not very long. It's what, 2.5 rounds. Khabib gets touched up a few times. He has to take more chances on the feet in terms of covering distance, which he can do pretty well with his shot, but he has to go from further out, and when he has to throw like weird uppercuts and then lunge into a double, because he just doesn't have the same kind of striking ability to close the distance in a more coordinated way. And that kind of made him a little bit more vulnerable at times to Dustin. Plus, Dustin was younger. This was how many years ago? I forget. Oh, Jesus. Tuki's crying. That means she didn't nap at school. Boys and girls, if your kid comes home crying and you're asking them like, oh, did they fight with someone? And they say no, the answer is that they didn't nap at school. That they're, 5. Islam is somewhat more vulnerable because he is probably likely to spend more time on the feet rather than really chasing the takedown. So there's like a trade-off there where each individual instance you're probably at less risk, but accumulatively, the more time I think you spend on the feet with a guy like Dustin, the more he's going to have a chance to land something. And I certainly don't think his power has waned at all. I mean, that power's the last to go, and he looks like he can still fucking pack a wallop. So I think it's roughly the same. But it's just, dude, I mean, here's the thing about Makhachev that like people just I hate to accept. He makes real good decisions. He is very careful. He is very patient. He is very controlled, and he doesn't get. I mean, obviously, I know he got knocked out early in his UFC run, but he doesn't really make a lot of mistakes anymore. He just doesn't get out in front of his skis. Everything is real precise and on time, en route to what he's doing, and his control on the ground is fucking next level. So, yeah, I mean, Khabib was a little bit more wild and a little more reckless. Dustin was a little bit younger. I don't think it's a big difference one way or the other. We've always talked about Khabib versus Tony as the one that got away. That's a big one that got away. Another one that I would have been interested in seeing was Tony versus Poirier. And given they are both topical right now with fights upcoming, what better time? Oh, please, no. Oh, you mean as like a potential one? Yes. Who do you think would have won if they had fought? Let's say anytime circa 2017 to mid 2019. around the time Dustin beat Holloway for interim 155 gold. I'm going to pick under the conditions you have made, circa 2017 to circa 2019. Remember, this is towards the end of the drop, towards the end of the winning ways, I should say, especially as you get to 2019 of what's the last win that Tony has? It's the Cerrone win. What's that, 2019, 2018, something like that? So I would have picked Dustin. I mean, dude, Dustin finished Justin Gaethje, finished Eddie Alvarez, finished Michael Chandler. I mean, you got to be fucking, dude, you got to be finished Conor McGregor. Like, you got to, I mean, I realize some of this happened after a lot of that happened after 2019. But I'm just pointing out, like, dude, you are talking about a fucking war horse. The only guy to beat, he beat Max Holloway twice. Only got to finish Max Holloway. I mean, fellas, Tony takes way too many risks on the feet, even in his prime. I think it would have been bloody, and I definitely feel like he could have subbed him. You know, you never know. Jump on a Darce, and Dustin could have been vulnerable in that way. That's part of it, but I just feel like he would have like part of the reason he came undone against Justin Gaethje is because his positioning is all out of sorts, and he has weird combinations where he is walking into things and whatnot. He just got beat soundly on the feet by a much improved Justin Gaethje, who just, you know, demolished him. But it's all those risks he takes. It's all the weird, in many cases, bad positions that he put himself in, and it, you know, against lesser opposition, he was able to fucking, you know, come back and do all kinds of crazy stuff. Again, I think his best win is the Rafael dos Anjos win. That, to me, is just an incredible win. 5 rounds, Mexico City, nearly 8,000 feet in the air. And he looked incredible doing it for the most part. Like, that to me is so amazing. That's such a dominant and incredible win. Certainly capable of beating Dustin, but I don't know, man. Dustin is, I think, a different level, even then. Oh, good question. So glad you asked. Makachev says the new UFC gloves will cause more cuts, and Strickland says they were designed by people who have never been in a fight before, but didn't elaborate much. Do you have any provisional opinions on them, and have you heard any off-the-record feedback? Not heard any off-the-record feedback, although I haven't really gone chasing any. I think, in fairness to all the parties involved, we simply have to see what the data shows over time. There really is just no way to know. There's just no way to know. I know that when they introduced the gloves, that they said that they had some, to your point, some provisional data that it could lower them or lower the amount of eye pokes, not so much cuts, but certainly the amount of, and I think they thought it would do less abrasions. But like I said then, I'm going to say it now, we simply need to see the data. But like, this is all so reminiscent to me of when the UFC brought in the Reebok kits, or when they brought in USADA, and you look at it and you say to yourself, you know, some fighter input at the early stage probably would have made this a lot better. And by the way, that wouldn't have made it perfect at all. There would probably have to be adjustments no matter what. But the UFC consistently does this, where they're going to introduce fight kits now. And by the way, don't forget, for the women, there were like form-fitting issues about it. That was a big problem. That was one. Of course, you know, taking away all their pay and everything. But I just mean, like, these decisions about what they should be wearing and who should benefit from it, it just got made without the fighters. Or bringing in USADA, we're just going to bring this in. We're not really, you know, we asked the fighters if they wanted this, and they all told us yes. And in the end, everyone was happy to see them go, right? This, to me, is the exact same thing. The UFC is making decisions where they don't really need fighter input. Maybe they say that they reached out and made a nominal effort. I don't know, but whatever it was, it doesn't matter. There was no one at the table saying, hey, I'm a representative of all the fighters. I am negotiating with you with the power of the law behind me, which, if you have a collective bargaining agreement and that group is a union, the UFC would then have to negotiate with them, because they would be the legal representative for them. That would be a thing that would have to happen. And their interests could be then, you know, safeguarded through that process. But that never happens because there isn't one. And so what do you get? Like, people are like, oh, the UFC is going to be so mad that the fighters are complaining. I don't think that they give a fuck. I mean, they probably don't like it. I'm sure that, you know, Dana might see some of it and, you know, not be happy with it. Probably, right? I mean, they can be sensitive too. But in the end, if you're the UFC, what the fuck do you care? What has a fighter complaining about anything? Reebok kits, USADA, Conor McGregor being the one exception there. But of course, it wasn't just him. He was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. Gloves, anything. What has any of that done to change anything the UFC has ever wanted to do? Nothing. It means nothing. It means zero. It doesn't mean shit. The UFC still creates, in the other cases, problems for themselves because they don't really do a great job of incorporating fighter needs or demands or interests, and they kind of have to play catch up later. So I wouldn't be surprised if they don't make additional iterative adjustments to these gloves over time. That would not surprise me at all, that they don't have data to make a good call. They're just going to launch this shit into the fights, and I guess we'll see what happens, you know? And I don't think it'll be drastic one way or the other, but there probably could be some meaningful differences over time that need to get adjusted. They're just going to do it. So, like, you know, it goes back to this thing. Did you guys see Sean Strickland complaining about fighter pay? And he's like, the UFC doesn't do the right things and blah, blah, blah. And I saw, by the way, so many of his supporters being like, if you don't like it, leave. It's like, well, they can't. That's part of the issue. But the other one is like, ask yourself, very basic question. What is Sean Strickland complaining about fighter pay? I agree with him, and I think he's right. Doesn't matter what I think. What is him complaining about any of that, even in a public setting to Daniel Cormier or to whomever? What is that going to do to fighter pay? Nothing. Fucking nothing. Nothing. Fighters rejected multiple efforts. Let's be very clear about this. Fighters rejected not just one effort, multiple efforts at getting either a trade association or a unionization effort going. They did not want it. So to me, subsequent complaints about gloves or fighter kits or any of this shit, in one ear, out the other. That was your window to make sure you had a say over equipment changes like this. You passed on it. I'm not saying Sean Strickland in particular or Islam or anybody else, but the fighters had a chance. They can, and by the way, they can try again. You know, okay, great. But like, it's so empty to me to watch these criticisms about the gloves or pay or blah blah blah. All these things that, or at least not all these things, many of these things which could be handled or adjudicated or mitigated at a bare minimum by a fighter rep protecting their interests in any kind of new process, equipment process in this case. They punted on it. They said they don't want it. So just my response is, I'm not trying to be mean, but my response is, this is literally what y'all voted for. You voted for it. Enjoy. All right. Luke, thoughts on the Craig Jones Invitational? Did you happen to catch him on Rogan, and how is your own interview coming along? Well, heads up on this. He will be on MK tomorrow in studio. Craig Jones will be in studio with us tomorrow at noon. Craig Jones will be there at noon. So the show starts live at 11 a.m. as it always does, and we're going to have Craig at noon. Craig will be there at noon. So what do I think? I think it is partly genius and amazing to watch, partly a little reckless. In certain ways, extremely meaningful. In other ways, kind of, I'm not going to say vandalism per se, but a big demonstration that may not lead to anything, you know? It's definitely going to have a big impact in the short run. I do think that is true. Whether or not it has any impact in the long run, like lasting, meaningful change, very much remains to be seen. Because the interesting part is he's going to, you know, winner will get $1 million or whatever. But the reality is, okay, and then how do you do this again? Like that event is not going to make money, right? That event is going to hemorrhage money. It's not going to make a dime. They'll make some money back at ticket sales ostensibly, or any potential broadcast arrangement that they come to, some of this will get back some of their money, but it's not going to be a money-making venture. It's going to be, there's a reason why they don't do $1 million payouts in jiu-jitsu, because you ain't going to make your fucking money back. And so, this is not something you can do unless you've got some benefactor who just doesn't give a shit about punting on their money, which potentially you could find. But yeah, so as a short-term thing to really raise the consciousness, it's big. It's really, really big. I have questions about what happens after August. September 2024, where are we with any of this? I'd be very curious to find out. All right. Anything else here? Good question, Luke. By chance, did you get to discuss the breakup between Corey and Christian Allen more off air? I did not. That was, remember, if you guys, I interviewed Corey Sandhagen, and he said he split with his longtime striking coach, Christian Allen. I don't know what the story is there. But this person writes, while I respect Allen, I have long since thought Corey should enlist another coach to take the lead in his corner, as Banks, Hall, and Allen all seem to be just cheerleading him in the corner. The Jan fight in particular stands out to me, as Corey literally had to tell his corner, tell me what to do, as they were just staring at him on the stool. My only concern is that Corey's striking style seems to be more symbiotic with Christian Allen, the way Christian Allen would fight, and many of Corey's striking philosophies, you can tell, are heavily influenced by Allen's. I'm super excited to see him with a wizard like Whitman. Yeah. Big change. I'd be very curious to see what happens. No, I don't know what the story is there. All right. Luke, I'm going to the Dublin press conference on Monday. If they give fans a chance to ask questions, what should I ask? Dude, it's a pep rally. It's not a press conference. Fans are not. There's no such thing as inviting the fans to a press conference. It's a pep rally. Totally different. They can call it a press conference. It's not a press conference. It's a pep rally. So, I don't know. Ask them anything fun. It's there for fun. So whatever that is. A press conference is not for fun. A press conference is for information. So again, I'm not saying, Luke's saying press conferences should be more important than pep rallies. Well, in some sense, it depends what you have to say. But no, not really. Not really. But you just have to call things what they are. A ham sandwich is not a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. They're both sandwiches, not the same thing. All right. Let's get to some of these questions. Let's see what y'all got here for me. Right. As a reminder, you can join. You get exclusive videos that don't go anywhere else. Plus, you can contribute to the paid portion of this individual, or I should say of this communal act that we have. You get to contribute to that for free. Yes? Okay. Very good. Let's turn this one off. There we go. All right. Let me get a sip of water. Starting the BC Bidet Fund. A little bit weird, since he's scared of washing his ass. Just jokes. Love you guys. Poirier is going to have a Bisping moment. He might. I remember UFC 199 very clearly. He might. It was not expected to do what he did, and he did it. So we shall see. Ryan says, hey, Luke, what do you think of the Paulo Costa curse? Every pay-per-view he's fought on and was not the main event, a new champion is crowned, and all by finish. Dude, Poirier can win this fight. No, I don't believe in curses. These are just fun little things. But what are the odds? I've actually not looked at the odds. Let's see. Best fight odds. Let's see. For fuck's sake. Hold on. The odds are... Oh, there's a karate combat. Oh, it's the grappling one, right? All right, there's one this weekend. Okay, UFC. Here we go. Okay, they got Makhachev. Our boys and girls at DraftKings. They've got Makhachev at -650 and Dustin Poirier at +470. Let's see where he was against Khabib. Yeah, about the same. A little bit, actually a little bit better. He was +385, -500 against Khabib. They thought he had a better shot. I don't agree with that. I think he opened at +280 and then -400, and it's only ballooned. I don't agree with that. I think that Poirier's got a better shot than the odds indicate, for whatever that's worth. All right, let's see here. Luke, long time, first time, says Daniel. Thanks for the content over the years. I had a hunch last summer and bet on Los Blancos to win the UEFA Champions League at plus 900. Is there any way your boys don't get it done this Saturday? So announcement, we'll be watching live on this channel. We're going to have a Champions League watch-along this weekend, boys and girls. A Champions League watch-along. I don't typically do a lot of those, but Madrid is playing in them. What are the chances? I think Dortmund is actually a very, very good team. I don't think that they should win, but I guess we'll see. But hopefully it'll be the 15th victory for Madrid. Either way, I invite you, 3 p.m., to watch along with me right here. Okay? We'll watch that together. Just a couple of hours. It'll be fun. My friend just shared, Puneet says, my friend just shared some conspiracy videos on social. The pyramids are computers. Humans and dinos coexisted. Those are fun. Feels like a dangerous, slippery slope. How would you get through to someone like this? I'm not sure that you can. I don't think that you. I am not an expert in how to get people out of conspiracy theory rabbit holes. I don't know how to do that. But one thing I have seen in reading about people who have been in conspiracy theory rabbit holes is that it's really not. It's partly a function of this information that they trust and this other information that they don't. And how you combat that could be quite difficult. But the other one that you really pick up on is that when people go really far down that rabbit hole, it also ends up fostering a sense of community with the other people who are down there. And in the worst possible cases, or in many, actually, it's not just the worst ones, but in many sort of more aggressive cases, that community ends up supplanting the real life community that they have, including with family and whatnot, which is really quite tragic. You see some of these QAnon people that have like given up their wives and lives and family and all to pursue this sort of like nonsense in the end. And you hear like people who got out of places like that, and they're like, I don't think folks understand that you are part of this world where you feel like, it makes more sense to you, and then you're sharing this community with people who have like similar life trajectories, or they ended up in a way down there with you in a similar kind of circumstance. And it builds camaraderie, it builds community, it builds relationship. And so you have to pull them not merely out of ideas, you have to pull them out of a space where those are the bonds, so to speak, that they are making. But how you do that is very, very difficult. This is why it is difficult to get people to give those things up, because you're not just being like, you were pro-life before, and now you're going to be pro-choice, where you're arguing about a single issue. It's about the world around that. The Last Stand 001 says, what would be more shocking, Dustin winning via guillotine or Dustin winning via cut stoppage because of the new gloves? Oh, that's funny. The guillotine probably, because it would be so crazy. But if the gloves end up doing it, that's such a good point, dude. Again, we don't know about the gloves. They could end up being much better than the old ones. We will have to see, and you should keep that in mind. Like, we just don't know. People are going to say they know. We don't know. That's not to dismiss some of the fighter concerns. I'm also a little bit concerned based on what they've said, but in the end, we just have to see what the data shows. Nevertheless, if someone ends up getting cut because of these and then loses a fucking title, there's going to be hell to pay. But again, what am I going to say? You voted for it. Cray says, you see Islam invite Charles to Dagestan. I did see that. Charles learning wrestling with Islam and Khabib would make him damn near unstoppable. Assuming he accepts the invite, how does he do against the top 5 at 170? Okay, let's look at the top 5 at 170. Let's pull that up. All right. Assuming he gets some of that Dagestani wrestling in him. The top 5, let's skip Leon for just a second. That would be Jack De La Maddalena. That's still a tough fight. Colby, he could probably beat Colby. Shavkat, I don't like that fight for him. Well, Shavkat can be reckless. Bilal, I don't like that fight for him. And then Kamaru. Yeah, the problem is this. Like, you guys saw it against Armin, right? Where if you take him down and you go chest to chest with him and you eliminate his ability to maneuver his hips and you don't create too much space for him to get the intervening spots, he can be much more manageable of a task. And with that weight up there and everything, that's going to be tough. That's going to be tough. I think he can beat a couple of those guys, but that's about it. Ryan, welcome to the party, good sir. Fred says, last time Nick won a fight, Obama was in his first. Is that true? 2011? Jesus. Poatan was 0-0 in kickboxing, and Francis still lived in Africa. Had never heard of MMA. Jesus, that is sobering, to put it mildly. Good Lord. All right. Trevon says, or Trevon, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. Please forgive me. I've been weight training with just kettlebells for 5 years. It definitely can get the job done. Facts. Kettlebells are people. You'll see these memes. And they'll be like, a row of dumbbells, and then a row of kettlebells, and then a row of like weight machines, and then like a row of like cardio machines. And it's like you got to eliminate one. And I've seen people be like, oh, get rid of the kettlebells. I don't use those. I just go to the gym and use the conventional stuff, the weight machines, the dumbbells, blah, blah. And I'm like, dude, if there is one thing that you want to keep in your home gym more than any other thing, and again, this is going to be different depending on who you are, but for people who are like looking like, what's a great way to save space and get strong as fuck, dude, a kettlebell will fuck your shit up. Believe that. I'm telling you. If you can take 2 kettlebells, 34 kilos each, and you can double snatch, let's say 15 to 20 reps of those, dude, you're going to be strong as shit. And I mean, I know, some people can do a whole lot more than that. I recognize. I'm just saying, like, if you can double kettlebell snatch 34 kilos in each hand for like 15, 20 reps, just to get to that spot, you are going to be strong as shit in so many different places. And it provides a bit of a metabolic training compound, a metabolic training factor as well. Especially when you have to do like, the same kind of reps over and over and over again for a particular exercise, or you can do EMOMs and you can do them quickly every minute on the minute. Kettlebells, dude. Again, I'm not saying it's the best piece of equipment for very specific needs, or if you like training with a barbell, then go train with a barbell. But for all these questions about like, oh, how can I get jacked at home with minimal equipment? The answer is unimpeachably kettlebells. MMA Sauvage says, people usually talk about how padded Khabib's record is. However, his resume in the UFC is very similar to Tony's, who's considered great. Why is that? Because people fucking hate on Khabib. There's obviously, like, if you look at the early part of his run pre-UFC and even early parts of the UFC where, he wasn't fighting necessarily world beaters every time. Yeah, that's true. But this will happen to everybody you love. Everybody you love and watch right now who's kicking ass, who beat a bunch of the best people that they possibly could. When they retire, there's going to be a new crop of fans come up and be like, this guy was a bum. I mean, to watch these fucking stupid ass conversations about St. Pierre, it's like comical. This guy could not be touched for the vast majority of his career. Contender after contender after contender after contender. A couple of slip ups along the way, and that is it. And he avenged all of those too. It's just ridiculous. Luke, you're going to do nose beers with Craig Jones on tomorrow's MK. Not a nose beer guy. It doesn't do it for me. Felipe says, hey, Luke, is it fair to say that Anderson Silva's boxing fight against Sonnen in Brazil is yet more evidence that there are no dignified and graceful exits in combat sports? It's a melancholic and frequently ugly process. I guess I'm going to say we should probably wait to see what it looks like before we're super down on it, I guess. But probably is going to be ugly. Probably is going to make us feel real bad. Probably. Yeah. JP says, as absurd and problematic, I think you meant to say as Strickland can be, do you appreciate his unfiltered ramblings about topics like fighter pay and corporate greed in general? Sure. I mean, I appreciate that he has some awareness about people who come from the place where he comes from getting screwed by the systems in place or bad actors in more elevated positions that want to keep people like him out. He's very keenly aware of that. I mean, maybe hyper aware at certain times, but aware. Sure. I absolutely appreciate that. And again, like I don't know if he was one of the guys that didn't want to unionize. I can't say, but yeah, Yeah, I definitely appreciate it. He's got some awareness. It leads to what I would find are some views that are a lot ugly on the other end. But at least in terms of that, he does have a keen sense of, coming from working class life and then seeing how hard that is for people, and then how those people get screwed and not being happy about it and being vocal about it. Yeah, sure. I mean, I disagree with a shit ton of stuff he says, but I can definitely applaud that. AG, welcome, my friend. All right, Max says, thoughts on Kopylov going with a wrestling-heavy game plan versus Almeida instead of the slick kickboxing that got him on the map. It makes sense, but selfishly, I prefer fun Kopylov. Dude, I don't remember the details of the fight to give you an accurate response. I apologize. Sometimes I get asked to recall certain things that happen, and I can't quite do it with memory. I'd be giving you some kind of bullshit answer, so unfortunately, I cannot answer it very well. Greg writes, if Dustin beats Islam soundly, okay, like in the way you say there's no reason for an immediate rematch, okay, who would you like to see next for Dustin? How much longer can he fight? That's a great question. I don't know. It doesn't sound like he wants a fight with Conor, so I don't know what the situation would be there. I'll be honest with you. I wouldn't hate a third fight with Max. Would you? If he becomes the champ? You know what I mean? Max at 155 and Dustin at 155. I wouldn't, I wouldn't want both titles on the line. But I don't know how that would work, but I wouldn't hate that. Otherwise, you could do what? Yeah, a bunch of rematches. He fought Gaethje already a couple times. You could do Arman. I don't know. I don't know how much of a. Yeah, no. So I'd say if Conor wins, you could do that, or you could do Max. I'd be cool with either of those. Or you could have him go to 170 and fight Colby or something, but he'd be champion. So what's the point? Yeah, something like that. Crackman says, "How is the decision process on choosing guests?" I booked Craig a while ago. I didn't know he was going to do a media tour. The very week that I booked him, I hit him up and I was like, "Hey man, you want to be on?" He was right away. He was like, "Yes." But we had difficulty like timing a day, and eventually we locked it up. And so that's how it ended up being on a Friday. Like it wasn't, I would have done it differently if I could have, but whatever. I didn't mean to be like the 80th podcast he's done this week. When I found out like he did Rogan, then he did Ariel, I was like, oh, fuck, but nevertheless, we'll have our own conversation. It'll be fun. I don't know, man. Like, it's not a super complicated process. I mean, sometimes it comes to you a little bit easier. People will pitch you people. That's one way to do it. It's nice to have incoming traffic. I know that people wanted to. I know that there were some folks that got floated to us that we turned down this week because it just doesn't do anything for us, Craig was one that we had wanted for. I didn't know Craig was going to do all this CJI stuff. I only wanted Craig on the show because we just wanted Craig on the show, and then he was like, "Yeah, I'm going to be in New York on these dates. Let's hook it up." So we did. But it's just like, here's what I'm looking for. I want people on the show or here that people want to see. Like they can, there's interest in them, but much more importantly, that they have interesting things to say. And, you can get dumb motherfuckers on your channel who just say wild shit and it can do a lot of views. I don't have any interest in that. I just have, I don't give a fuck about it. I just don't care. Let someone else do that. And they can do more views than me. They can have a bigger channel than me. I just don't care. So, Craig fits that nicely. Craig has, by the way, in studio is also always going to be a benefit. He has interesting things to say, and people want to see him. That's exactly what I want. And then we just ask. We just go around asking. It's not that hard. Well, I won't say that. It's actually quite hard, but getting guests is not a huge priority for me, but you get the idea. All right. Lazybed says, Luke, DP says he's walking out to a mashup of Willie Spence's cover of Diamonds. I did hear about that. And his usual James Brown. I did hear about that as well. Yes. What two songs would be your ultimate MMA walkout mashup? Okay. I've said this before. The best walkout in UFC history in reality is going to be BJ Penn's walkout. I think Max Holloway's walkout. Anybody who's got a walkout that is deeply rooted in their culture that they come from. And again, I cannot pronounce it, but the Blaydes guy, Israel, got a super long ass last name, where you're like, it's all about being from Hawaii. And like, dude, it would send chills up your spine when BJ would walk out. And then Max coming out to Moki Boys, Hawaiian kickboxer, is just so fucking perfect. So I don't have anything cultural like that. I would have to go to some other level of like, you know, I don't know what Armenian songs would be, or, you know, I could do something Colombian, but I'm not Colombian. Like, I would just be kind of like pantomiming culture. I try not to do that. I try to like learn about Colombian culture and enjoy it where I can, but I'm not, you know, I'm a guest in the house of Colombia. I'm not, you know what I mean? So the best walkout that I've ever seen that I just fucking loved that was not along those lines is Tim Boach. The Anvil of Crom, from Conan the Barbarian, is just one of the hardest fucking walkouts. When you hear rhythmically what's supposed to sound like, you know, the sword being forged on the anvil, and they're banging it out and making the long blade, is so fucking dope. Is so cool. I remember I was like, I don't know how good Tim Boach is going to be, but he'll never be. Like, that is so fucking cool. So fucking cool. So probably that with... That's a tough one. What would the second part be? Man, I don't know. I have to think about the second one. You know, there really is no song about DC that would really fit very well. The city where I live, it wouldn't fit very well. Because you got like Mambo Sauce, who did Welcome to DC, which I love, but it kind of isn't the same vibe as the Anvil of Crom. One of my favorite songs from Vinny Paz is Cheesesteaks, which is probably his biggest hit. And it's about Philly, so it doesn't work either. But like that song, if that song was about a place where I was from, and I could play the Anvil of Crom, and then going into that, that would be a pretty great matchup for me. Like, that doesn't exactly work, but yeah. MMA Sauvage says, I don't know why, but I feel like Islam will stop Dustin via buggy choke or Von Flue choke. Buggy choke is highly unlikely. It'd have to be underneath. I don't think that's going to happen. Von Flue is a possibility. Volk's chances against Chandler Connor at 170. Yeah, they're going to be too big at 170. It's just too much weight. Hi Tom says, Luke, how much does Costa's relative inactivity affect your vision of him? Not a ton. He got better. I thought he looked more mature and poised in that Whitaker fight, even though he lost. And that wasn't that long ago. I didn't realize there was a layoff before that, but you know, I don't think not much. I don't. Right now, I wouldn't say a whole lot. Plus, his style is not. I don't think it's, you know, unfair to say it's not super cerebral. It's a lot of physicality, which is still very difficult to deal with, but it's not like you have to be, you know, inactivities can mess him up. It's just going to be a lot. There's going to be some factor of brute power being more dominant in his game, and that's going to allow him to be, relatively speaking, a little bit more inactive at times. Fight Talk, thank you so much. Not Dick says, regional Muay Thai greater than regional MMA. Shout out to Warriors Cup. That might be true. I've been to some regional Muay Thai, but nothing too crazy. Samuel Smith, thank you, my friend. Welcome to the party. Devin says, does Team Alpha Male get credit for its longevity? Not much. They should. They've been a great team, and they've really kind of changed over the years, and they've still maintained relevancy, partly because of the leadership that they have in Uriah Faber, and their recruitment. But yeah, like, no one wins that long by accident, for sure. And they've been pioneers of the game to a degree, you know. Sean Kelly says, is it safe to say because the UFC didn't release pay-per-view numbers for 300, it didn't do over 1 million? Probably. We know they like to shout about success, but tend to keep quiet when they underperform. They definitely released a lot of metrics, and I think if they had sold over 1 million, they would have leaked that to the Sports Business Journal or something. Nevertheless, while it probably didn't do 1 million, I bet it did do really well. So, You know, it didn't do gangbusters, but it probably made some money. Sam says, hey, Luke, how do you think these hypothetical fights would go? Diego Lopez versus Ortega. That's a tough one. I might say Lopez. Ortega's been super inactive. Although he did look good, I guess the last time he fought. That's a tough one. Volk versus Gaethje. Gaethje's probably going to be too big. Usman versus Bilal. I'll take Usman. Although, yeah, I'll take Usman. Francis versus Aspinall. I'd probably take Aspinall. Jake Paul versus BJ Penn. I have to take Jake Paul. Fucking kill me. Fucking kill me. Not in MMA. Although even in MMA, maybe. I don't even know. Certainly in boxing or whatever. Max says, advice on moving in with my girlfriend of 18 months. Ooh. I've already tattooed take out trash in my brain, but want to be thoughtful as other relationships failed at a similar point. Moving in at 18 months is a little quick, my G. Not for everybody. Not all the time. It's a little quick. So how many times have I lived with a girlfriend and then it failed? Let's see. I think definitely one big time. Yeah, really just one time. Just one. I mean, yeah, just one. Really just one. I had a 3-year relationship. She lived with me. Actually, this used to be my bedroom. And that one failed. Not because of that, but it failed. Advice. Yeah. First thing I'm going to tell you is you need to be on your cleaning game 100%. 100%. Like, dude, I cannot overstate to young men of the world. If you aren't doing what you are supposed to be doing in terms of either whatever your role is in terms of upkeep, whether that's outside the house, inside the house, washing dishes, laundry, however you all separate all that. If you don't do that shit, trust me, bro, she's going to leave your bitch ass. She will leave you. Like, it's a guarantee. I've talked about this before. Don't take my word for it. You can look it up. There are numerous studies that show that when women in relationships, particularly when they have their co-inhabitants, that if the guy's not doing his upkeep in terms of not just personal cleanliness, but in the house, they begin to see him as a dependent and they lose all desire in him. And then they begin to just move on and get resentful. It happens all the fucking time. And the trigger that the willingness to pull the trigger on leaving you is much quicker on their end than ours. We have a tolerance. We can just live in filth. Guys can just live in filth. I mean, just, compare a sorority house with a fraternity house. Like, one is infested with maggots and roaches. And then, one is like, you can do a magazine shoot. Right. Dude, that will ruin don't play that game. You will lose it. You will lose that game. You will lose that game. So don't play it. Beyond that, giving appropriate space, I think, is important. Understanding the rules about how you're going to share financial responsibilities ahead of time, having all of that planned out, all of that prearranged. The point is not to have like, oh, what do we, we can, break glass in case of emergency in the event that something goes wrong. You don't even want to get there. You want to have an agreement, not a prenup, but I'm saying like an understanding ahead of time about how all that's going to go before that ever happens. Otherwise, you are headed for failure. Make no mistake. All right, let's see here. What would be the better feel-good MMA moment? Dustin beating Islam or Michael Bisping KOing Rockhold? They're pretty equivalent. I mean, maybe a little bit more with Dustin because of recency bias, but dude, when Michael Bisping beat Luke Rockhold, that was such a big deal. And remember, he took that fight on 2.5 weeks' notice. It looked like the ultimate Hail Mary. He was shooting a movie in Toronto. He worked for SiriusXM at the time. I interviewed him. Remember, he said he was going to, you can look it up. He told me he was going to I'm going to do this. I'm going to walk on water, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm going to go knock Luke Rockhold the fuck out. There's an awesome quote he gave. And sure enough, he actually ended up doing it. And then people were asking, oh, maybe you should have 3-week camps. It's like, well, let's slow down a little bit on that. But that was big. That was really, really, really big. And he had beaten everyone that mattered and that he could. Obviously he lost the Dan Henderson fight and he had lost some other ones too, but like he had just never given up. And then he beat Anderson Silva, and that was in London. And that felt pretty big. I remember he got almost knocked out in that one and then came back and won the fight. It was just incredible. So that was so huge, really, really big. And remember, he had lost that fight before. So that was a rematch. And the first time they fought, which was in Australia, Luke Rockhold one-armed guillotined him. One hand on the floor, one hand with the guillotine, and then launch. Right? I mean, he smoked him. So this would be kind of like that. Dustin has achieved basically everything but this. And he is an ambassador for the sport. Dude, with the exception of Colby Covington just chirping about bullshit, you never hear bad stories about Dustin. You never hear people complaining about him. You never see him on the police blotter. You never see anything. And yet he's got this huge new endorsement with Bud Light, and he's got one with Samsung and Celsius, and he's got his own hot sauce brand, and he gives back to his community, and he fights like a fucking possessed warrior. And he's got all these incredible wins. He's got some tough losses too, but he's got all these incredible wins. You know what I mean? What is left? The only thing left is the belt. That is how it kind of felt with Michael Bisping. It wasn't the same. There were differences. But that thing, the one thing he couldn't get, the one thing that's eluding him, and also towards the end of his career too, they're very similar. I don't know if one would feel much different than the other. They would both be remarkable. Does Luke Rockhold, Anthony writes, have the best pound-for-pound ? Kick among elite-level MMA fighters? He's got the prettiest-looking one. I don't know if he has the most functional one. Glaube Feitosa, not an MMA fighter, but a kickboxer, had a much better one. But he has a pretty-ass one. I mean, it looks like that thing just whips beautifully. Andre, welcome to the party, my friend. Obese Tomato says, is Nick Diaz returning a reflection on the UFC failing to create and promote new stars? Seems the next few years, UFC will be losing many of their brand names fighters without creating new ones. This is a constant concern that I think is somewhat overstated, but it definitely does show that in terms of, and these are not headliners, but you've definitely seen that they don't have enough headliners to do, they have a problem filling all their shows with top headliners, and partly that's why the BMF belt was created. They wanted another belt in circulation that would enable them to serve in a headlining role with guys who couldn't necessarily fight for the title. I don't think that they're banking on Nick Diaz's star power all that much. This feels a little bit more like charity, to be honest with you. I think the question about the UFC star power and whether they're creating stars is more relevant for who's headlining versus who's not. That is where I think the majority of the criticism, such that it exists, lies. Connor Fowler writes, any thoughts on UFC's announced new partnership with snake oil merchants Ares Tech? Did you guys see this shit? I don't even know what to say. I mean, you know what? I thought Jack Slack said it best. It's I don't even care that they've got these dog shit, totally unscientific sponsors. It means nothing. Don't care. But that money should be going to the fighters. And it's not. It's just, listen, Dana White changed his health. And I mean this sincerely. That's hard to do. He lost a ton of weight. He looks to be in great physical condition. And he got a hold of what he was eating, changed his habits, and he looks so much better. And and I mean this sincerely. Congratulations to him. That is hard to do. That is really hard to do. So I admire that. But along the way, he's just buying all this bullshit from Gary Brecka, who's just so full of fucking shit. I mean, anybody in the evidence-based community that I have seen has been extremely critical of Gary Brecka Lane Norton, Mike Israetel. You can go on down the list. All these guys are what the fuck is this dude talking about? And so it leads to shit like this. You know what I mean? It's obviously silly and totally unscientific nonsense. But if that money was going to the fighters, I'd be well, now it's just selling bullshit to donks. It's welcome to America. Thane Littlejohn says, suggestion on shoes for people with flat feet. You mean me? So a podiatrist will tell you to get orthotics. That's what they told me. And again, you should listen to a podiatrist more than you should listen to a guy with an MMA podcast. What I can tell you is that for some people, I think orthotics are going to be a very good call and could be very beneficial. For me, I had a real big problem with using orthotics. Not that they don't necessarily work in the short run, but that part of the reason why I have gone to wide toe box, zero drop, and not in all cases, but in many cases, minimalist shoes, is because I'm actually trying to strengthen my feet. And you can do certain exercises over time if you're committed to raising your arch and strengthening your feet overall. That is the path that I want to go down. I don't want to go down a path where I am relying on what is essentially a crutch to have my feet feel better. I want to see what I can do without it. And I will tell you, I've had a great deal of success. So the first thing I'm going to tell you is you should always consult a medical professional for any of these kinds of questions. If you get the same kind of response that I got, which is that you should just wear orthotics, first of all, listen to the doctor and why he's telling you that. But if you're, 44 is not young, but I'm not 70, I still have time to work on these kinds of things. I was not satisfied with that answer. And so I've tried to do things to strengthen my feet, as I indicated, and I've seen good results from them over time. But ultimately, that's between you and your doctor or between you and whoever else. Lil Lou says, shouts to you and BC for providing us great content. Drinks are on me. Yes, thank you. Go Dortmund. Boo! But thank you just the same. Fight Owl says, there were many predictions Justin might age Max like he did Tony. Is it possible Max may be the one who did that to Justin instead? Yes. Also, are you seeking professional help for your porn addiction? No. Is it an addiction or is it a passion? Yeah, no, I think you get a knockout like that, you're not going to be the same afterwards. I mean, how diminished you will be remains to be seen, but you're not going to be the same. No chance. Mike says, what other potential fights for Nate Diaz would you want in a match in a UFC return besides the McGregor rematch? None. I don't have any other ones. Like, it's not, again, everyone hears this and they think, oh, it must be intensely personal. You don't like Nate. I like Nate a lot. I have nothing negative to say about him. But like, oh, there are like 3 or 4 fights that I'm interested in seeing? No, I'm not. I don't. I just think, yeah, I don't have one. Chris writes, in the event Poirier brings the belt back to the Bayou, can we get a Q&A with him like you did with Sandhagen? I would love to. By the way, Dustin doesn't wrap his knuckles. He says they're thinner over his hands. Yeah, him and Gunnar Nelson didn't do it. Yeah, although I've seen Dustin do hand wrapping as well. So that might be relatively new. Regarding Max, Lucas says, it seems that he had a much better planned bulk to compete at UFC 300. Yes, than the one he had at 236, 100%. How do you think this weight gain will impact his cut in case he has to fight to Topuria? See, this is the thing. Max even tweeted me. He was like, what should I do next? I think he was just looking for some engagement. But I don't know how much sense it makes to like bulk up to 55 just to go right back down to 45. So this is why I'm saying, like, if Dustin ends up winning, they're probably just going to do an immediate rematch, But if Dustin ends up winning, the Max fight at 55 makes a lot of sense to me. They already fought at 55, and this is now be a different one. I don't know how good it is to go up and right back down again. Like, that seems like it could carry some costs. Alan W says, MMA fan base seems like me the only sports base that supports the owners over revenue. Seems to me the only sports base that supports the owners over revenue. Not totally. Do you believe the transient nature of the fan base or possibly difficult in combat knowledge gain in driving casual majority? Yeah, I mean, that's part of it. What I'm also going to say is, like, why do people get bitter at the lockout in various other leagues, NHL, MLB, whatever? Why do they get bitter about it? Well, one is that they lose out on the sport if it runs over the season. The other one is, hey, I don't want to see a fight between millionaires and billionaires. So you get a little bit of dismissiveness there, especially if the owners are like, hey, we came to them with a great offer. But it's a little bit more two-sided. This one, you don't exactly have that, but it's the same kind of feel. It's the same kind of, are you getting in the way of the product? And the UFC's position is, hey, we want to move product. And when fighters complain, they're complaining about that. And so that's why you kind of that's why there's this natural alignment between the fans and the UFC, in certain cases, but not always, against the fighters. They don't have, their interests don't necessarily fully overlap. And so that's why you end up getting some of that animosity. I don't know that it's entirely the same, but because the consumer's interest more naturally aligns with the promoters, that's going to be reflected in their opinion. Seb says, hey, Luke, are there any new plans for changes to the channel, new ideas? Also, there's a bunch of shit I'm working on. Also, any thoughts on covering topics outside of combat sports? So let me just say one thing, and I'm working on this. I don't have an announcement yet, but it's something I'm working on. I've made this point in a previous video. I don't know how many people watched it. It didn't do super great. I think it's like 20,000 views, whatever, relatively small. I want to get off the algorithmic treadmill badly. I want to keep doing stuff on the algorithmic treadmill in the sense that I want to keep feeding the beast that can produce the most amount of views and attention and dollars. Yes. But I also want content that gets me off of that. I don't think the best content is the stuff that does the best in the algorithm. And when I say the best content, I mean the most meaningful, the most interesting, the most, in certain cases, intelligent, even in cases, the most fun. Not everything that works well in the YouTube or Instagram or TikTok algorithm is the best kind of content. You have to kind of make it work for the algorithm. And I really desperately want to get off of that. Not completely. I want to keep feeding this beast, but I want to have another lane as well where I can create content and work, and in certain cases, journalism that is not subject to that, or at bare minimum, less subject to that. That is what I would love to do. I feel like there is an entire world of people who want to see that. I feel like if you can do it right, there'd be a good audience to attract for it. And I think people are, dude, if we live in a world where the platforms dominate, YouTube dominates, TikTok dominates, Instagram dominates, we've just given media back to tech oligarchs. They create the platform and the algorithm that makes the platform work. And everything has to homogenize itself to a degree to make it work within the algorithm. That can't be good. Everyone does a podcast, then pulls clips and then uploads it, and it's all the same thing. And it's trying to say incendiary shit and blah, blah, blah. We do it too, because you fucking have to. I don't like it. I don't want to do content like that. I mean, we can continue to do it to feed the beast, right? Feed the beast. But at the same time, I want to have an off-ramp off of that algorithmic homogeneity. And if you guys want to see something like that, by all means, please let me know, because that is what I'm working on. And that dovetails with, like, for example, it's a smaller thing, but like some of the technique breakdowns I get up, there's a lot of time, like, I mean, I put up that disclaimer for a reason. I don't present these to you to be the best or the only or the most complete findings, just mine. I also encourage you to hear what other analysts have to say, because I have to rush those things out the door. And I end up sometimes like seeing stuff that that should have been included later, or I should have stated this a different way. I want to be able to take my time in certain cases with content as well to make sure that it's got the certain kind of polish. Everything is about immediacy. And I'm willing to do that too, right? Like, I've gone live on my phone now twice to react to breaking news. It's great. You guys liked it. I liked it. It's a winner. We'll keep doing that. But at the same time, dude, I want to get off of the shit where I'm just fucking chucking content out, you know, as much as possible. And I'm trying to, how do I capitalize? You know, everything now is like, you know, you have to capitalize certain words in your headline. Oh, this guy destroys that guy. This guy savages that guy. That's all just designed to pull the algorithm. Everyone's thumbnails kind of looks the same. How do we get off of that? How do we get to a place where we can produce content that has less of those constraints, less homogeneity, maybe less of an audience, but the ones who would be up for it, I think, would really like that. So don't get me wrong. We're going to keep feeding this beast, and I like doing this. Please don't misunderstand me. I really do. But I want to do things where I am not stuck to the algorithmic treadmill. And I feel like I would be a lot happier. And I think you guys might get a lot better content in that process. How is the relationship with DK working out for you in BC? Slow but surely. Seems that perhaps you two have more freedom and control of some of the content and ownership. Yes, that is true, but we're still trying to get the second day off the ground. We have a meeting about that coming up, actually. So I'm cautiously optimistic about making some progress in that direction. Yeah, DK has been great to us, and we're very happy there. I know you're a fan of Red Letter Media. I sure am. Other shows and podcasts you enjoy. Do you have any recommendations? Yeah, you know what? You know who's great is Derek Thompson, and he does Plain English is the name of the podcast. I like his. He's had some stuff. He does some politics stuff, but honestly, some of the best stuff he does is in sports. So he's been talking about like these analytics wizards about the changes in basketball and what they actually were from Jordan on. And also he's big on like why streaming works, why streaming fails. And he talks to all these business analysts, and they explain to you the mechanics about why certain streaming platforms work and scale and blah, blah. Fascinating, awesome stuff. Who else do I like? I don't listen to a ton of podcasts. I'll pull up my, hang on. I'll pull up my Spotify. Let's see. Inside Boxing Live is a good one. Philosophy Bites is another one I like. Yeah, stuff like that. I don't listen to a ton of them anymore. Crackman said, Khabib said he utilized Dustin's love of jumping gillies to tire him and to get him on the ground. Relevant for the Islam fight. I don't know how. I mean, that's probably true. I don't know how wise that is. He did it in the Islam, or in the Khabib fight. He does jump guillotine, but it's like. And then Q says, could a Crawford Usyk win a belt in glory and won? I doubt it. They could probably just get leg kicked to death. Yeah. Dustin says, is Rountree's first positive in new in-house drug? Oh, is he the first positive? The first positive that we know of. Heard it was a 2-month suspension because I think he was able to prove it was contamination. Any info on the new guidelines? Guidelines are available for the public. Similar to USADA. Yeah, all those available to the public. They're different in numerous respects. We've been over this a million times. So, all right. I think that is it. So let's do this. Reminder, you can become a member, all that good stuff. Folks, let's talk about this. Saturday, we'll be doing a watch along for Champions League live at 3 p.m. Live at 3 p.m. And then 3 p.m. East Coast time, New York time. And then we'll do a post-fight show for UFC 302. Going to be fun. So a lot more for you guys coming up this weekend. And then, of course, MK tomorrow, Craig Jones in studio, youtube.com/Morning Combat. And then, of course, we're back on Monday as well. So a busy next few days. Love you guys. Enjoy the press conference. Thank you guys so much for watching. I greatly appreciate it. I got to go teach the Tookster how to ride her bike. I'll be back. See you all next time. Until next time, stay frosty.